Good morning, everybody. I just loved the weather today. Summer's not too far away to not remember how awful it was. So I'm really enjoying the cold and the wetness, and just wonderful. And thank God for that. We got to the end of summer, exactly. So this morning, I'm going to talk to you about faith and a little bit of enlightening commentary that I got from Thomas Merton about what faith is and how we get to use it to get closer to God, to know God. Okay, so, sorry, I'm very chesty, so forgive me if I'm clearing my throat and it's irritating. So during my centering prayer in the morning last week, I was reading Thomas Merton, and I'd like to share what came up for me in that time. I always start my prayer with reading something from scripture or other spiritual reading. And at present, I'm working my way through Thomas Merton's new seeds of contemplation. Sorry. And as is usually my experience with Merton or with mystic reading, I read something that resonated. With me, that called me to listen more carefully. And to actually go back and reread what I had read so that the richness of the meaning could come through to me and I could understand it better. Now, when I refer to the mystics, I'm not referring to some kind of weird kind of faith in which people see books and things. The mystics really are people who believe that we can have a very real experience of God in the world. They believe that He lives within us, within our hearts, and that is scripture, and you can read that in John. And the mystical church actually was once part of the whole Catholic Church when there was no other church but the Catholics in the early days. And there was a split in the Catholic churches at the time of the Council of Nicaea, where the Greek church, which is the church that the mystic religion and faith emanates from, actually disagreed with the Council of Nicaea when they were writing the Creed, the Nicene Creed, to the degree that the Eastern representatives actually left and would have no more part in the writing of the Creed. And since then, there's been this split. So that's when the Greek church sort of became an entity on its own. And it is a lovely, soft faith, and it's a faith that I can really relate to. And that's why I enjoy the mystics. The Western church, which would have been Rome, takes its doctrine from Aristotle and also from St. Augustine. And as you know, Aristotle was the master of rationality. So everything in their doctrine, had to have a rational explanation. But the Greek church actually understood the mystery of our Christian religion. And as you know, our faith is, our Christian faith is what we and what we believe is called an anti-fideist religion. Now, okay, so that's a very big word, anti-fideist, but Christianity generally is anti-fideist, and it means that we believe that there are some things that we know now on earth, but there is a huge chunk of mystery in our faith, and we will always have questions that we will never know the answer to. And we connect with those questions through faith. Now I'll get onto more of that in a second. Now, what I read in Merton is that he says, if there is no light of faith, no interior illumination of the mind by grace, by which one accepts the proposed truth from God and thereby attains to it, to speak, so to speak, in his divine assurance, then inevitably the mind lacks the true peace and the supernatural support which is due to it. Okay, so let's just have a quick look at this. So if there is no light of faith, I'm just going to move myself a bit so it's not so bright behind me. So if there's no light of faith, okay, he's talking about something that is kind of an intangible concept, a mysterious concept. And if there's no interior illumination of the mind by grace, in other words, our rational explanation for scripture or for anything, but particularly for our relationship with God, must be illumined by God's grace. In other words, it must be touched by it. It must be made richer by it in a way that's mysterious to us. So if we don't have this light of faith, in other words, acceptance without question, by which one accepts the proposed truth from God and thereby attains to it, accepts it, believes it, so to speak, in his divine assurance, then inevitably the mind will lack true peace. It will lack the true knowledge and message of God, the supernatural support which is due to it. So by this word supernatural also, again, Merton is not alluding to something scary or suspicious or spooky. It's probably not a good word to use because it invokes that in a lot of us in the world. He's actually just saying that this is something, it's supernatural. In other words, it's above the natural physical world that we know and understand. So it's something we don't understand. And what he's actually saying is if we don't accept this supernatural, above the physical world explanation, then we will never truly know God. And that is understandable because God is much bigger. He is much bigger than we ever kind of give him credit for. We tend to see him as, we tend to have an image of him that is like us, because we are told that we are born in his image. But he is so much greater than what we are in our physical world. He goes way beyond the boundaries of our world. And to know Christ in his fullness, we need to understand this. One of the things that I like about Thomas Merton and the mystics is that they see an experience of God as essential to real faith and belief in him. That is why he says, sorry, lost my mouse. That is why he says that if we have not experienced the warmth of that sacred light as part of an experience of God, then we tend to only believe with our minds, and we subject all things to a rational analysis of its truth. And that's his allusion to the Western Church and the influence of Aristotle's rationality theory. And this is not how a relationship with God works. How often, like myself, have you questioned your belief in God, working with our intellects, our minds, and not our hearts? Because faith and Christian faith is heart-based. The main overall message is that we love each other, we love ourselves, and that we spread compassion and the love of Christ in the world. It's heart-based, it's not head-based. And we question the scientific validity of things like, for example, Jesus' resurrection. Because after all, how can someone rise from the dead? Intellectually and scientifically, that's not possible. And how often do you speak to non-Christians who bring that up, who say, that Christianity makes no sense? Well, it doesn't, unless you relate to it through the heart and you understand that there is an element of mystery in faith. Real belief, or shall I say real faith, cannot be subjected to scientific evaluation because God is beyond what is rational. He's beyond our rational minds. God rests in our hearts. The authentic light of faith sets our hearts aglow with sacred certainty. And it's not a certainty that says, yes, I understand, now I can believe. It says, yes, I understand and I love God, although I do not know everything. That faith overwhelms our hearts, overwhelms the physical boundaries of our hearts, so that our love flows unimpeded from us into the world to be a healing balm in the brokenness of all God's people in the world and God's world itself. Nothing that confines itself to the physical limitations of the world or of our rational minds can do this. Our faith requires a trusting surrender to the expansiveness of God. Remember, we often say that God is beyond what we can ever imagine or explain, and that's what this means. This is why it is referred to as supernatural faith. It exceeds the boundaries of what we can see and touch and understand. Faith is nothing unless it can surrender to itself to God and to God's world without question. It is nothing unless it can withstand the criticism of those who wish to stay safe within what they can understand with their minds. Such people will never know what is possible in God, and they will never feel His touch because they simply will not allow it to happen. So I challenge you to try and sit even for 5 or 10 minutes in silence and be in the presence of God and listen and watch with the true light of faith. Surrender to new ways of experiencing God and allow the light to infect your heart so that we can become don't like the U word. We can become a compassionate and godly presence in the world. I desperately want to make some kind of contribution to ending the violent destruction of God's world and his people in the world today. And I'm more and more conscious of that the older I get. My heart bleeds when I listen to the news, the global news on CNN, and I realize just how few people are able to live peaceably together, are able to love one another. How will we ever find peace if we are unable to love each other? Love each other for who each person is, whether they're different, whether they disagree with us, whether they're a different color or a different language. We can still love them. Many of the mystics, I'm going to stretch your mind a bit now, but particularly Cynthia Bourgeois' work and movement, believe that those of us infused with the light of Christ are positive energy centers in the world, who will be the people who will heal the world. Okay, so this may seem bizarre, and when I read it, I certainly also sort of a bit of an alarm went off in my mind, and I sat and chatted to Mike about it, with my husband. And he agreed with me. He said and Mike is an engineer, he knows chemistry, he knows physics. He says we are energy centers, and we are. I, as a psychologist, know from neuropsychology that the impulses of our thoughts and our feelings and our bodies move through our bodies through electronic energy, or however you say it. The messages jump from synapse to synapse, fired up with energy. So we're not just dead, hard bodies in the world. We are living people, and our bodies are living, and we are energy centers that you can't really dispute. Even Aristotle would agree. What they are saying is that through this energy, this positive, if we are infused with the love of God, then our energy will go out into the world as love and compassion and as healing. It might seem bizarre because it doesn't fit with our finite and logical view of the world, although there is scientific proof of that. But remember the mustard seed. Before you say that this is not possible, this is nonsense, this is far-fetched, this is heresy, remember the mustard seed, the smallest seed in the world, wherever. Who would have thought that a mustard seed would grow into one of the largest trees that there are? And Jesus tells us about Matthew, tells us about that in Matthew chapter 3. I'm going to go find my other set of teeth. And but beyond that, he says that the kingdom of heaven is like yeast that a woman took and mixed into about 60 pounds of flour until it worked through all the dough. Who would have thought that was possible? And then also in Matthew 3 is Isaiah's prophecy, which tells us he anticipates the fact that we are not going to open our ears and our eyes to the truth of God, that the devil will close them because we rely so much on our minds and rational thinking. Isaiah prophesies, we will miss out on a relationship with God and all its extensive, miraculous characteristics that could be part of our lives, that could heal the world if we stay here and not here. The prophecy says, you will be ever hearing and never understanding, and you will be ever seeing but never perceiving. For this people's heart has become calloused. They hardly hear with their ears, and they have closed their eyes. Otherwise, they might see with their eyes and hear with their ears and understand with their hearts and turn, and I, God, would heal them. So isn't it beautiful? I mean, and it tells you, if you open your ears to the expansiveness of God, if you open your eyes to the expansiveness of what God can do in your life and through you in the world, you will be infused with God's grace, awake and alive with His light burning brightly within you. And maybe we could just heal the world. Sorry, my computer is not helping me this morning. It's all helping me. A moment so I can find my place. I hope I'm not pouring cold water on this amazing truth that I've just shared with you, because I've lost my place. So we just finished with the mustard seed, and we finished with Matthew and the widow's yeast. Consider this as a possibility. Can you extend your mind to accept the prospect that we are essentially centers of energy in the world? And when we have faith in God, unquestioning, surrendered faith to God, in God, we are positive centers of energy, and God can use us to move His compassion and love into the world and heal it. We will not hate, we will love. We will not kill each other with violence. We will uphold each other, sustain our lives. We share our energy with the world. Is it impossible not to because of the dynamic? It is impossible not to because of the dynamic and moving nature of energy. But just like we know that positive and negative energy has an influence in our world, it's negative energy that causes depression and upsets our relationships in the things we can or cannot achieve. We also believe that this energy may extend further than we understand. Consider the possibility that whenever we share positive energy with another, that somehow heals a heart or sustains a part of God's creation in a way that repairs and heals the world. To do this, we need to extend our thinking from just ourselves as an entity in the world, to understand ourselves as part of a limitless universe in which the earth is sustained in a vast network of energy. And now I'm going to stretch your imagination just a little more before I close and run away. Can you accept that positive energy in a person who believes is the love of God? The love of God, the most powerful sustainer and healer of all things created. This is how we change the world. And we must each do our part, and it will happen without us even knowing about it, because God will use us. This is how we heal our broken world, person by person, in the mystery and power of faith in God.